I don't think the language that the person speaks should be a barrier to accessing information. At Microsoft, something that was really part of the fabric was the concept of globalization, localizability, and localization, and kind of making it a native experience in the sense that it felt native to the people that were using the products, but also kind of in the sense of the software, that it was native into the software. And so you should feel that the software was created for you in mind, and your experience should feel local and relevant.
Lexigo presents The Native Experience with your host, Brian.
Hello world, this is Brian from Lexigo.com, and you're listening to the Native Experience Podcast, the show that believes in continuous improvement personally and professionally. Our goal in this podcast is to go beyond translation and localization and discuss creating truly native experiences for diverse audiences. And today, we are talking with George Russo dos Santos, Localization Program Manager at Block. We're very excited to have him on today, and just a little bit of information about George. He's originally from Portugal. After studying engineering in college, he started working for Microsoft in Dublin, Ireland, where he was the localizer of the first server operating system localized in European Portuguese. The job started his career at Microsoft and in the localization industry, where he progressed to the role of a software engineer and later project manager working across software and content. George relocated to Microsoft's Seattle area headquarters in 2003, continued to work for Microsoft until the mid-2010s, and at Microsoft he worked on Windows servers and tools and cloud and enterprise divisions, which involved different languages, methodologies, and challenges. George has extensive industry experience working at Cisco, Workday, Meta, aka Facebook, Amazon, and Block or Square, expanding his skill set to hardware, firmware, and multimedia localization. He's a certified project management professional passionate about localization. He truly believes that one's native language should not be a barrier to accessing information or technology, and he's made it his life's work. Well, George, welcome to the Native Experience. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we need to know a little bit more about you first before we dive in. So tell us about yourself, talk about what you do, talk about what you do for fun as well.
My name is George. It's actually spelled like Jorge, but I'm originally from Portugal, so we pronounce the J like in English. So it's pronounced George in Portuguese, and it's similar to the English George. I live in the US around Seattle. As I said, originally from Portugal. I started working in localization because Microsoft wanted to hire someone that had technical and linguistic skills. So I didn't know a lot about that at the time, but I joined in because it seemed interesting and I wanted to work in a multinational environment. I haven't looked back since. In the meantime, I moved continents because I was working in Ireland. So moved to the US, been working in localization, left Microsoft in 2015. I've been kind of jumping around the industry. I'm working for a company called Square, which does payments and a bunch of other stuff to empower small businesses, although moving into other types of businesses as well. And I also teach the classes on localization project management at the University of Washington, which is really nice.
Excellent. Man, you keep a little busy, sounds like.
Yes. And that's not like taking into account hobbies and family and all of that. Like my hobbies are soccer. I'm a really big soccer fan, although nice. For people outside of the US and Ireland, I should say football.
Yep.
I like cycling and I like to read nonfiction.
Oh, that's nice. Very cool. So I have to ask though, being a soccer/football fan, do you like Ted Lasso? Have you watched that show?
Here's the thing. I think Ted Lasso is an amazing show for an American audience.
Okay.
I can see how outside of the US, it's not as interesting. The same thing. I don't know if you saw that film, Crazy Rich Asians.
I have not yet.
Okay. I kind of enjoyed it. And I have no connection with Asia, but I thought it was like an image of Asia and Asians from a US perspective. I could see how, from someone in Asia, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So I love Ted Lasso, but from an American perspective, because that's where I live.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting perspective. So now the question is going to be, what do our friends in the UK think about it, and is it represented correctly or not? But yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective. Well, cool. So cycling, I'm not much of a cyclist as much as I love riding my bike, though. I love getting out on it, but I'm not like the long distance kind of power cyclist or anything. But it sure is. Just before we're getting on the show here today, had to get outside, enjoy the day, enjoy the sun. And it's so nice.
And if I can make a pitch for cycling,
Please
in
do.
my case, it was more of like getting lemonade out of lemons. Because I used to run, and then, my knees started to get weak. And then I thought, I need to get into cycling, also doctor recommendation. And it's really nice. You can go longer distance. It's not as impactful to your body.
Yeah.
So it's nice.
That's so true. A little personal factoid about me that I've not shared on the show before, but I'm a tall person, so I ruptured, back problems. Most tall people have back problems, it seems like. I ruptured my lower disc in my back. Had to have surgery. Unfortunately, that was one of those things. I don't recommend back surgery unless it's a last resort, and for me that was. In the process, they fixed that, but then they ended up damaging my sciatic nerve permanently. And so I don't have brain signal down to my left leg to certain muscles. And so walking is a challenge. I can do it. I can walk, but I had to learn how to re-walk again. But walking is a challenge. The beautiful part about cycling for me is the muscles used to basically power a bike. It's not the same ones for walking. And just like you said, with joints, it's so much easier on impact and everything else. And I can pitch, biking all day long.
I'm sorry about your back problem, but
thank you. And it happens, right? Nice. Yeah, but like you said, making lemonade out of lemons, you got to find the next thing and move forward, and can't stay stuck as a victim. So how many languages do you speak? Portuguese,
English. I can get by in Spanish. If I'm in Italy or France, I won't die of hunger.
Okay.
And that's about it.
So if you had to choose only one language to speak for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's a really tough one. It really depends on what stage in life I would be, because obviously if I didn't speak English, my professional life would go down the drain living in the US, but I can't imagine not being able to communicate with my family. So I have to go with a heart on this one and say Portuguese.
Okay. That's awesome. What about if you had to live in one country? I mean, it sounds like you've had opportunity to live in different countries, which is great. But if you had to choose one country, what would it be?
Again, I think it's going to depend on which stage of my life I am and like where my kids would be. I would always want to be close to them, but
let's say they're with you,
like back in Portugal, because that's where all of my family of origin is there. If I had to kind of just make a random choice, not random, but kind of not without any preconditions, I would say Costa Rica, just because a country that doesn't have an army kind of seems like a good place to be and has their priorities straight, or is too idealistic, which is fine by me.
So are you going to try to get back to Portugal then, towards the end of your working career, or?
Probably. I mean, once I stop working, I think I'll travel more, and kind of once my kids are out of school, I'll have more freedom. I don't know if I'll live there forever, because it's one of those things, never go back to the place where you were happy. A lot of things have changed and family has moved on, but I'll always try to have a connection to Portugal. Okay, hold on. That's the first time I've heard that phrase, never go back to the place where you were happy. I thought that was a common expression. Could be. Maybe it is. I've never heard it personally, though. So maybe. And explain this one. I'm curious now. Yeah. So to me, what it speaks to is that when you move forward, you go without baggage and preconceptions. While if you move backwards or moving back to the place where you were happy, you always assume that something is going to happen, that you're going to connect with certain people, and that might not be available. So it's always hard to go back to a place where you were happy because your expectations are so high. That's how I interpreted it. Okay. I've obviously heard the phrases, the grass is not greener on the other side. You think it is, but it's really not. Or, going back. There's all kinds of different phrases I've heard, but that is definitely the first time I've heard that phrase in those specific words. But that's powerful because, gosh, so many people live like that. There's another expression that a friend of mine uses. When you immigrate, you're never going to be satisfied, because whatever place you go to, you're going to miss like your culture and your family. If you go back to wherever you came from, you're always going to miss the stuff that you had where you immigrated to. It's tough when you immigrate.
So really, the advice on this would be to love what you have right now and continue to move forward. And
yes,
really don't look back in a bad way, or don't look back longingly to wish you had. And it's like, oh, I had it then. Let's move on. Let's keep going. This is great.
That's one of the things that I kind of regret about social media. Yeah. Because I think growing up without social media, I had the opportunity to kind of rebrand myself, grow in different directions. It's kind of just as an example, my full first name is Jorge Miguel, and everybody used to call me Miguel back in Portugal because that's how my family would address me. And then when I moved to an English-speaking country, because George was my first name, I started going by George. We didn't work out so well because my manager at the time was married to a Mexican lady, and so everybody was calling me Jorge. And then I spent 1 year teaching everyone, no, it's actually George. Yeah. Because they had heard my name before I was hired, and then they hired the Mexican guy whose name was Jorge, so spelled the same way but pronounced in a different way, and then it was very confusing. That didn't work out so well, but I think the fact that you can move forward and kind of evolve in different ways is something that I kind of regret about social media, because it can kind of stuck you to an identity that you had for a period of time, which might not be the best fit going forward. But
yeah, that's so true. Well, and people have a tendency to compartmentalize and categorize things. So, for example, I play the piano, and some people are like, "Oh, you're the piano guy," or I started roasting coffee because I'm somebody who has a lot of interests. And they're like, "Oh, you're the coffee guy," and I'm like, "Stop pigeonholing me." I'm not, I'm not one of these things. I'm multiple. You're right about with social media. That's what, and they advise you to do that. If you're creating a brand on social media or with your business, they advise you to stick to that one thing because that's what people do. But that's interesting. Continually moving forward. I know you're a big proponent for continuous education. One of the values at Lexago too is evolve, which of course is about continuous improvement, not only professionally, but also personally. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about right now, which is cool, is, living in the moment, learning from it, valuing everything that you have right now, and then continuing to move forward, continuing to grow. But what else about continuous education? What else do you love about that? What do you do with that?
Having different perspectives on a common problem is always good. And I think it also makes life more interesting, because if you are kind of just working on the same stuff over and over and over, you can start to be a little bit skeptic about your work, or cynical about in life and in your career. You can think of it as like a ladder where you can have steps that are deeper, and you can have, let's say, lengths of steps that are shorter or longer. Learning something, feeling comfortable with it, establishing yourself at that pace, and then kind of learning more and growing more. I think it's a really good philosophy for your personal and professional life.
I find people tend to, get stuck, like you said. They kind of get into this rut. They get comfortable. Not everybody, of course, but you see it, you hear it, and people feeling okay with mediocrity, or with the mundane would be another word that I've heard used quite a bit. I'm big on this too, where it's just constantly improving, and content, but improving.
And I think it's very important for people to have different areas of growth. Maybe you're in a position where what is required of you is that, and there isn't a lot of room for growth, but you can grow in other areas. You can start cooking, you can start gardening, volunteer, and start being a public speaker, or there's a lot of areas where we can enrich our life outside of professional realm. And I think if you do those things, probably good professional opportunities will materialize in the future to stuff that you like, that brings you pleasure. And in the future, you will probably be able to use it, which is kind of added bonus.
I completely agree. And being curious is a huge thing too, because not only, I always be curious, what can you learn? What can you do? And like you said, cooking, or finding a new hobby, or finding something that's just kind of enriching for you. But also being curious, I think, in conversations. I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about how often do we listen when someone's talking? How often do we, ask clarifying questions? Or do we just jump to our own decision and our own viewpoint before really understanding the other person's side of things? It happens all the time. So being curious and asking questions and understanding, that's growth too.
In my family life, as a parent and as a partner, something that I needed to really work on is to just hear. Don't jump to a solution. Mm-hmm. Just hear what people have to say. Which,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm trying to get better at.
I think we all are. I am too. Kind of going along with this, I'm curious if you have encountered, I'm sure you have, but what word or phrase did you encounter that didn't directly translate into another language correctly? Maybe you even did it yourself where you said something and people were like, wait, what?
Portuguese people and anyone that speaks Portuguese know the word that I'm going to choose. I think if you are a good translator and if you have like a really good cultural understanding of both languages, there might not be exactly a word, but there should be a way to translate the expression. And so I've heard that there's a lot of different words for snow in Finnish. And so in Portuguese and English, there's probably just a couple of them. So I kind of regret a little bit the premise of the question, because I think as humans, we should be able to communicate that, because we're all at the core very, very similar, but the word is going to be saudade. So that's a Portuguese expression that kind of means longing for something that can be a way or kind of just a feeling that you're going to miss something. It's a word that is very hard to translate.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's not a direct translation word wise. You have to almost explain.
Yes.
The whole
you have
feeling.
to explain that kind of, that feeling of longing for something that has gone or that might disappear. And it can be like a place, a person, a feeling.
Say the word again.
Saudade.
Okay.
It's spelled Saudade.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense now. But I see what you're saying about having to explain it. And obviously that can be very personal too. But yeah, interesting. Yeah. Cool. Tell me what your favorite foreign language film or book is.
This is interesting because growing up in Portugal, there isn't a lot of native cultural production in terms of like films like that. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of books. So I watched a lot of foreign movies, read a lot of books in English, but I was like, I need to find something that is neither in Portuguese because it would feel like cheating, or in English because it would also feel like cheating. So I didn't have to look too much for it, because this is actually really one of my favorite movies. It's called Life is Beautiful from Roberto Benigni.
Yep.
And it tells the story of a father that goes to a concentration camp and he hides like the situation from his son. And I watched it a couple of times, more than a couple of times. And the first time I watched it, I didn't have kids, but I still loved the movie. But then watching it with kids, it's something else. Yeah. Really, really touching.
Yeah, that's a great movie. I haven't seen it in years. I think it was right after it came out is when I saw it, and it'd be good to go back and watch it again.
I was getting a little bit emotional. It's a really great movie because like it touches everything. Like it's funny, it's emotional, it gives you an historic perspective. I really, really like it.
I got a question for you. Are you tired of spending hours transcribing audio or video content? Yeah, it can be time consuming. Do you want to create accessible content for a wider audience, but struggle with time-consuming subtitling and translation? Well, listen on up. I got a solution for you. Check out Scribe, the effortless solution for transcription, subtitling, and translation. With Scribe, you can actually translate speech to text in record time, create on-brand subtitles instantly, and translate and create subtitles across 171 languages in just minutes. So there you go. You can check it out. It's for any platform, any language, anywhere. You can create accessible content and reach more audiences doing it this way. Feel free to try it out now if you'd like. Try Scribe. See how it can transform your media content creation process. Lexigo.com/scribe. All right, back to George. Well, we've talked about, some really cool things you're doing. We've talked about cycling and all that. I know you're excited about that. Are you nerding out on anything else specific that you really want to share right now?
I should be nerding out on LLMs right now and kind of all of the ChatGPT and Bard. And I've kind of been not going so much into it because I kind of want kind of the dust to settle before I kind of make more of a jump into it, because I think I've been lucky enough to kind of see a couple of waves happen, first with the internet and then Web 2.0. And so sometimes you'll kind of jump straight into the beginning and kind of ride that wave. But I think for this one, I kind of want to see how things happen, because I'm fascinated, but at the same time, I'm kind of skeptical about the use cases. I think there's a really good case for using LLMs to kind of do away with kind of the most boring aspects of some roles and kind of doing automation and all of that. But I think if we are not careful in the way that we use it, we're just going to be producing a lot of content that most people won't be able to use. And then we're going to be using AI on the other end to kind of distill all of that text that has been generated. But some of the stuff that is happening around AI with kind of voice, video, image is mind blowing. I will eventually nerd out on it, but for the moment, I'm kind of just trying to keep a distance and think about how it's going to happen.
Honestly, I think that's a really good idea, because just even thinking about trends that have happened over the years, you mentioned a couple of them too. And I know you've been in localization for around 20 years and stuff. So it is interesting to see kind of what's come, what's gone. Do you jump in on it? Oh, never mind, that's gone. That's, jump in on the next thing. Oh, never mind, that one's gone. In this one, I think it's going to be here to stay to an extent. I think the concern I'm worried about personally is I think it's a great tool. My caution is, how lazy are we going to get? And are we going to rely on this? And how accurate is it actually going to be without kind of fact checking? Because they're even saying accuracy is still an issue. So, it's a tool. It's an assistant essentially, but it's definitely not meant to take over or anything like that. Let's even dive into some of the trends that you've seen over time. How have you seen localization change?
When I started out in localization last century, not to date myself, I thought, this is kind of a engineering problem. Mm-hmm. We're going to solve a couple of these issues, and then it's just going to be like a translation problem. Even then, like, you couldn't really use machine translation, but you could use, matches and things like that. So you could definitely see where the recycling of the previous translated work and all of that, where it was going. And you could kind of foresee that you would have AI in translation. The part that I kind of didn't foresee, but kind of now makes sense, is a lot of these problems that I thought would be fixed, they kind of keep reappearing. And by now, I think it's going to be something that will continue for the foreseeable future. And that's the part about like having the right context, getting the right information. And so that's one of the reasons why I think automatic translation won't always be perfectly usable, and the LLMs won't be perfectly usable, because even in the same language, like you can have someone that has exactly the same cultural background as you, and you're still going to have issues around communication. So you can have, the same language skills, the same accent, grow up in the same house. And from time to time, you're going to say, oh, you meant that. Oh, I didn't understand that. And so I think we as humans will always kind of require communication, clarification. And so if you have that happening in the same language, once you start expanding to a broader region and like to continents and then across languages, I think there's always going to be a case that you need to have clarification and have explanation and understand the context and all of that. I mean, we wouldn't have humor if we didn't have those misunderstandings. Another issue that I saw, you feel that your job is disappearing. You're not going to have a job in the future. And unfortunately, I think that's the case for some people, but I think overall it will lead to better opportunities. I mean, in our lifetime, I feel sorry for saying this, but in most Western countries, people have access to the basics like, food, shelter, and all of that. Of course, there are exceptions and very sad, but like just 1 or 2 generations, that wasn't true. And like my grandfather, he was a subsistence farmer. And when he stopped doing that, like no one was willing to take his role, which I appreciate because it was a really hard life. And so with localization, I thought, maybe my job, I was a localizer at the time, maybe my job is going to be taken over because the content that I'm able to localize is going to get smaller and smaller as we use more automation. But what happened is that there was an explosion of content, and now you kind of see more and more content being localized, and like formats that we didn't think about localizing 10, 15 years ago, like podcasts, blogs, and, a lot of video. It's available. And so I'm optimistic for the future, but of course, things need to evolve. But I think there's still a lot of really interesting challenges in localization. We're just going to have to be able to work in different ways. I didn't get that wave, but I heard that there were a lot of translators that didn't want to use translation software. They still wanted to kind of use their own methods. You have to evolve, and riding the wave with LLMs, I think it's going to be a lot different from 20 years ago, but I think there's still going to be human intervention within localization.
I agree with you. It's funny. I was, when I was growing up, computers were becoming personal items. People had them, but not everybody had them, and not everybody used them that much, but we were studying some kind of a famous picture and commentary. I don't remember who did it. It might've been a professor, but the computer was the size of a room, and it was just insane. And the guy said in 50 years or whatever, everybody's going to have one of these in their home. And he was talking a room sized computer, and they were predicting that once computers are pretty much everywhere in people's houses, life's going to become easier, and you're not going to know what to do. You're going to be sitting around. You're going to be relaxed. You're going to be on vacation all the time because you're going to have so much time on your hands because computers are going to take over. Technology is just going to do everything for you. And of course, that did not happen. As computers became more widely used, as people started getting into it, and then of course, as smartphones got into everybody's hands, then social media came about. People are busier now than I think they've ever been. What's interesting to me is I look back at how everybody keeps claiming that this technology is going to solve everything and it's going to take the human out of the equation. That hasn't happened. It can't do everything for you. If anything, it gives us more work, especially in localization. Humans are essential for this kind of thing. And you're right, it might take away some of the more mundane, routine tasks, but it's going to continue to keep the need for people, for real humans to step in, to understand the context, to listen, to truly even translating on that kind of thing. Again, I've seen that with all technology, with everything. Humans are still needed. And if anything, it's just a tool. It's a tool to help us to take away some of those mundane tasks, but it doesn't necessarily take the work away. And people are afraid of that. And my encouragement is, don't worry, you'll still have a job.
That's really interesting because I think about this a lot. When I was born, I was the last child for my parents, and I was the last grandchild for my grandparents. I used to spend the summers with them, and they still lived in a way that was very ancient, in the sense that like I was maybe 8 years old when they got plumbing, like water into their house. Like they had plumbing, but they didn't have running water. So it was like a really ancient way of living. And so what I do every day, I don't know if my grandparents would recognize as work, because I sit at the desk for most of my day. I don't grow my own food.
Yeah.
I don't wash my own dishes. I don't wash, my own clothes. I do, but like I do it with machines. So like sometimes I think about this and I was like, how are the next generation, the generation over, what is it going to be for them to work? Are they kind of just entertaining thoughts and not doing anything physically? Because I don't think my grandparents recognize what I do as work. So
yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think about, my personal grandparents, and they did recognize that they were working at desks, and, they had some levels of technology, of course, nothing like what we have today. But then my wife's grandparents, on the other hand, they were living on a farm. They were in a different part of the country, and they didn't do any of that stuff. And so they would probably not recognize this. I mean, they would have known of it, but they wouldn't really recognize it, like you're saying too. So I think definitely you've got generations. You've also got different parts of the world and where you live and stuff like that too. So yeah, that's a really good point. It is kind of funny looking back a little bit because it does put, again, context. It puts so much context into how we got to where we're at today. You mentioned that we're seeing all of the same problems just packaged in a new way, essentially. I mean, you could say that about so many different things. Nothing really changes. We just find new ways of dealing with them. Sometimes it's better and sometimes it's not, which again goes back to what you said in the very beginning. We just have to keep moving forward, just keep learning, keep growing and figuring out how we can just make this a little better and a little easier and a little bit more effective for people. So I'm curious, looking back at your career, some of the experiences you had at Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, even now with Block/Square and everything, talking about localization, how have you provided truly native experiences for whether it was your users or whether it's, teaching your students how to also get the most out of localization and provide that native experience? So kind of a dual question, but I'm just curious what you've experienced, what you've done, and what you teach.
I have a personal motto, which is I don't think the language that the person speaks should be a barrier to accessing information. Fortunately, technology helps with that as well.
Yeah.
At Microsoft, something that was really part of the fabric, even if each team across Microsoft kind of had their own localization team, was the concept of globalization, localizability, and localization, and kind of making it a native experience in the sense that it felt native to the people that were using the products, but also kind of in the sense of the software, that it was native into the software. And so you should feel that the software was created for you in mind, and your experience should feel local and relevant. You open Windows, you don't think, oh, this is, an American product. Oh, this is something that I can use to do my work. And I can find my files, I can print, I can do this, I can do that. And it feels native to you. There was a period in my life where I went outside of localization. I worked as a release manager, technical project manager, because sometimes working in localization, you kind of, to use your previous expression, kind of the grass is greener on the other side. So you're kind of like, oh, let me work on the product and see how that is. But I quickly came back to localization because I really get a lot of personal satisfaction by making sure that people can access information in their native language.
That's great. So what do you recommend then? What kind of advice do you have for us as we're trying to provide a truly native experience for people? What advice would you have for us?
I would say empathy. Put yourself in someone else's shoes and kind of understand their experience and try to make it delightful for them. And so that's true for localization, but also a bunch of other things. And also making sure that you are receptive to feedback. Sometimes you can have the best of intentions. That's true for localization as well. You're, for instance, translating a game or a program that has been widely used in another language. And then when you translate it or when you localize it, people are upset because now they can't use it because the options are different, or maybe the character names are different, or maybe it doesn't have the same feel. So I would say empathy, getting feedback on what you're trying to do. Don't just assume that a user or a person wants something. check in with to see if that is really what they want to do. I think if you are a company or an individual trying to break into localization, I would say try to find a need and try to be very good at it. I get a lot of people contacting me on LinkedIn saying that they are experts on everything and that they have high quality and they have really low prices. It comes across as not being authentic. I understand why people are doing that, that they want to drum up business and all of that. But I think it's a much more realistic avenue to pursue, to say, I'm specialized in this and I can provide really good quality and even good prices because I'm just focused on this. And once you establish yourself in that area, maybe you can expand to another one, but saying that you can do everything with high quality and low prices, it's probably not real.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, even in podcasting, we're doing a podcast right here, and some of the stuff that I've experienced and learned and everything else, through that time as well, is you do get people coming in saying, yeah, we can do everything. We'll edit your podcast. We'll market your podcast. And I'm thinking, and it's not a team of people. It's one or two people. And you think there's no way you're good at all this stuff. There's just no way. Our brains all think differently. That's why you surround yourself with a team of people that are better than you at certain things, dive into the things that you're really great at, become an expert, become a master at it. And it's okay to utilize someone else's strengths elsewhere. And I like what you said there. Very, very good stuff. Very good advice. Thank you so much, George. I really appreciate your time and joining us. I have other things that I want to ask you, but we'll have to save it for another episode.
Thank you, Brian. It was really nice talking to you. And I learned a lot from you. For instance, I didn't know that really tall people always had back problems. So I have more empathy for tall people now.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I learned a lot from you too, so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Brian. It was a pleasure.
George Russo dos Santos, Localization Program Manager at Block. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We would love to hear from you. Send us your questions and comments over on email, nx@lexigo.com. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you in the next episode. And remember to always strive for authenticity and embrace the power of native experiences.